बारकल्लाहु फीक।
आपने कल बयान किया अच्छे तरीके से कि मुसलमानों में जो मुख्तलिफ फ़िरके हैं उन्हें किस तरह दावत देनी चाहिए
जी।
लेकिन जो मुसलमान नहीं हैं, हिंदू हैं, क्रिश्चियन हैं, खुसूसन हमारे यहाँ, उन्हें किस तरह हम हिकमत से दावत दे सकते हैं?
So yesterday our brother Al-Ustad Tariq Rohi Hafidhullah, he asked a question regarding how to give da'wah to the sects of innovation, and we clarified how to give them da'wah in the best possible manner to bring them closer to the sunnah. And we mentioned clearly that we do not argue with the leaders and the callers to bid'ah, because that is not our job. Regarding them is to abandon them and to boycott them and to make hajar from them and to make warning against them. As for their ignorant followers who are just mesmerized by the speech of Ahlul Bid'ah, then we, where we can, from our relatives and friends and neighbors, maybe work colleagues, maybe the person that we pray with in the masjid, that we put effort in guiding them and we show the best manners. And we are not showing the best of manners, meaning that it is not just an outward show, but it is because we should have the best of manners regardless. So it's not that we are bad-mannered, but when we see someone from the people of innovation, we just kick into good manners. No, our manners should be good anyway. And when they see our good manners, they may ask you a question of the sunnah, something about Salatul Taraweeh or Ramadan, or something that's happening in the house, so we give them da'wah. As for the Jews and the Christians and the Hindus and the Buddhists and the Sikhs and atheists and so on, then each of them also deserves da'wah. And this is the call to Allah and the call to the religion of Al-Islam. So we call them أَدْعُوا إِلَى سَبِيلِ رَبِّكَ بِالْحِكْمَةِ وَمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Call to the way of your Lord with wisdom, and the wisdom here meaning the sunnah, and by giving them admonition and arguing with them in a manner that is best. قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي أَدْعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ. And likewise the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, say to them, this is my straight path, and I call to Allah upon basira, meaning upon ilm, upon knowledge. So when we call the Jew or the Christian, then we call them to Tawheed, because this is the call of the Anbiya and the Rusul, that we invite them to the Tawheed of Allah, because all of these religions, whether it be Christians or Jews or Hindus or Sikhs or Buddhists or atheists, that all of them have abandoned the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And they have deviated from the deen, and they have deviated from the guidance of the prophets and the messengers, so we invite them to it. And that requires actually having some foreknowledge of what they're upon. Having some foreknowledge. So for example, knowing that the Christians believe in the Trinity, it's a starter to give them da'wah, because then we know what we are calling them to, that you people, you say that Allah is one of three, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Or, as the Catholics believe, that even, they raise Maryam alayhi salam to the level of being the mother of God, meaning that Jesus is God, so she's the mother of God. And they say that, waliyadu billah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sired unto Mary, and He begot a son. And the Prophet and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that the heavens and the earth are about to cleft asunder, to break apart due to this accusation that they have made against the Lord of the worlds. So knowing that this is the belief of the Christians, knowing the belief of the Jews also, in the fact that they raised their rabbis as lords besides Allah. So they changed the book with their own hands. They knew the truth and they hid the truth from the people. And they were people who refused to act upon the revelation. And they changed it with their own hands, and they raised their rabbis into lords, so they would make halal for them that which Allah had made haram, and make haram for them that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made halal. And they would kill their prophets, and they would deny the prophets, as the Jews, that they denied Isa ibn Maryam. And they claimed that they had killed him and crucified him, though they had not crucified him, but rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had placed His image upon someone else, and Allah had raised Isa ibn Maryam into the heavens. But the Jews, that they claimed that we have killed the Messiah, but they did not kill the Messiah. They did not kill the Messiah. So knowing something about the Jews in that regard, knowing that the Christians are ignorant, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Fatiha that they are ضالون. And as for the Jews, then they are maghdubi alayhim, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wrath and anger is upon them. Why? Because they are astray, meaning the Christians, because they act and they have no knowledge. As for the Jews, then Allah is angry with them because they have knowledge but they don't act. So therefore, knowing the background when you're giving da'wah to a Hindu, that the Hindu has all of these demigods, and they believe in a belief of pantheism, that Allah, in their eyes, they're God. And we don't even allow them to say that they believe in Allah, but they're God, that they believe that He is innate, or that He is inside of all of these other demigods that are, dozens if not hundreds in number. And likewise the Buddhists, in their esoterical beliefs. We need to know something about each of these before we give them da'wah. However, if a person who is very, very tuned into Tawheed, even if he does not know the background of any of them, because of his knowledge of Tawheed, no matter what they bring him, he's able to give them da'wah. Because this is the beauty of Tawheed, and the beauty of knowing the methodology of the prophets. Meaning that sometimes, of course, we may meet a person, we don't know his background, whether he's a Christian or a Jew or a Buddhist or whatever he is. But because of our knowledge of Tawheed, we are able to give him da'wah. And the da'wah should be done in with good manners, with politeness, with the view to invite them, not by swearing at their gods or, insulting their gods. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ forbade that, because you insult their gods and then they insult Allah. Because you have done it, so they think they need to attack your God, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's important that we invite to Tawheed. We invite to the worship of Allah. We invite them sometimes, our manners and the way that we deal with them is more of an encouragement with a lot of people than even what we say. So they know, for example, if you work, you come on time, you leave on time, you work hard, you don't drink, you don't lie, you don't listen to music, that you are honourable, that you visit your mother, you visit your father. When they ask you, what do you do for the weekend? Oh, I travel to visit my mother because, I look after her. You look after your mother? Because, a lot of these kuffar, they put their mothers into care homes and let, someone else look after them. Or they don't see them for years. So, and you say, well, what did you do with your wage last week? Well, I sent it to my sister and I sent it to, why do you do that with your wage? Because this is what we do as Muslims, we help each other. So sometimes the way that you act and your manners and your etiquette in front of the non-Muslim is a great encouragement for him to enter into Islam. But no doubt, whenever we give da'wah, the first step, now they want to know the rights of the Muslim women. Alright, for example, when you're giving da'wah, when you're talking to a Christian, he wants to get you on this issue of, for example, the rights of women in Islam, or slavery in Islam, or jihad in Islam. Because what they want you to do is divert you away from the core subject, which is Tawheed. So what we say is, I don't mind answering all those questions for you about slavery, about women's rights, about inheritance, about, prescribed punishments and the hudud that are present in Islam, and we don't deny them. But the core message of Islam is Tawheed. Everything emanates from that. If you're not going to accept the core message, how is this going to benefit you? I can tell you about the rights of Muslim women. Muslim women are given rights, over a century and a half before, the non-Muslim women. In Islam, we protect the mother. The most important person in the life of any person is his mother from amongst the people. That's the right that what do you think about your mother? Well, I haven't seen her. I only give her a gift once a year on Mother's Day. That's how you treat your mother. Now, how can you say that we don't give rights to women? Oh, but you have 4 wives. Yeah, I have 4 wives. But you have 3 mistresses and 2 prostitutes. What's better? That you marry a woman and give her rights. Those children are your children. They are responsible for you. She has a choice either to marry you or not to marry you. She's not forced to marry me. She chooses to live like that. She has her own apartment, separate from the apartment from the first wife. We don't put them into the same apartment. They live separately. Each of them has a home. Each of them has children and so on. Right, can we now go back to Tawheed? You happy? What more do you want? Say, no, these women are oppressed. No, she's not oppressed. She has a choice. She has a choice. Will you marry this man? She has to say yes, if she agrees. If she says no, there's no marriage. How is she forced? How big is prostitution in the Western world? Brothels and prostitute houses and women on the streets selling their bodies. In America, in the major cities of the West, there is not a major city in the Western world except that this takes place openly and publicly. And you're going to tell me about the rights of Muslim women? we could go into slavery on the same basis. So a lot of the time they want to talk about these other issues because these are the big themes of the West to discredit Islam. Oh, your Prophet came and all he wanted to do was to fight and kill the people. No, actually that's not true. Because for the first 13 years when he was in Mecca, there was no fighting. In fact, he was being tortured, or the companions were being tortured. He was strangled. The entrails of animals were thrown on his back. Sahaba, his disciples, were taken out into the open desert. And they were beaten and tortured and killed. He didn't fight back because it's not the time to fight. But when he moved to Medina and now he has Islam, are you telling me that he has no right to protect the Muslims and to spread justice amongst the people? Every Western country has an army. What, the Muslims aren't allowed an army? Everyone, even the neutral countries, the so-called neutral countries like Switzerland, have an army. But you're telling me that we as Muslims aren't allowed an army? Muslim countries aren't allowed. So what, we're supposed to be pacifists while you go and drop bombs on everybody else? And kill them and fight them, but we're not allowed to defend ourselves? Right, that's our answer to jihad. No, we don't believe in terrorism. No, we don't believe in bombing people. No, we don't believe in suicide bombings. That's just a fringe, a marginalized fringe, who are the most extremists. And we ourselves are enemies to them, just like you are enemies to them. So we have nothing to do with the Khawarij and the terrorists and ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We have nothing to do with them. But don't pick on the smallest, probably the smallest minority of Muslims and say all you Muslims are like that. Because no, actually, there's over 1 billion Muslims in the world. How many of them are members of Al-Qaeda or ISIS? A handful. So you're going to, tar every single Muslim in the world because of these extremists? Don't put that label onto me. Don't put that label onto me. Because I don't believe in what they believe. And the Quran doesn't command what they believe. Can we now talk about the core message of Islam, which is Tawheed, worship Allah, which is the message of Muhammad and Jesus and Moses and Abraham and Zechariah and Isaac and Ishmael. This is the message of all of those prophets and messengers. And David and Solomon, the prophets of the children of Israel. So Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam came in that long line of prophets and messengers, and he was the finality of them, and he called to what they called to. He called to what they called to. We have not sent you, O Prophet, except as a messenger, just as we sent those who came before you, so that you may call them to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So when we bring it back, yes, the Western media and those kuffar, those unbelievers, hypocrites, who want to pick out the faults in the Muslims, because Muslims have faults because they're human beings, and they try to pick out those faults and apply them to the religion, but the religion is free from it. Religion is free from it. So always take it back to the core message of the belief of the Muslim, the belief of Muhammad, the Tawheed and the worship of Allah, even though we can answer these peripheral questions, no harm. But I don't want to be lectured by a hypocrite, Western unbeliever, who's going to tell me about Muslim rights when we look at their level of domestic violence and murder and brutality against women in Europe and the US. You're going to tell me about the rights of women? How many, women's refugees are there in the UK, in every single major city? These are battered women, battered partners. Their own boyfriends put them on the game, put them on the streets to sell their bodies, and they run away from them. Then they catch them and they beat them and they put them on the street again. Where these, what they call now, in the old days they used to call them prostitutes, now they call them sex workers. Because they think it's more, PC, politically correct to call them sex workers. But they're prostitutes. They have pimps who basically sell them to people for money. You're going to tell me as a Muslim about the rights of women? Soon as you leave home and your mother reaches retirement and she gets ill, the first thing you start doing is phoning up the care home to see where I can dump her. And you're going to tell me about the treatment of women? This is the mother who bore you and she raised you and she cried over you and she walked you to school every single day and she made your lunch for you, and when you came home she cooked and she cleaned and she put you to bed. This is the mother. Now when she needs you, you send her into a nursing home. Let strangers look after her, who don't clean her. She may soil herself, and for a day and a half they won't even go to her. She cries for you and you don't visit her. You're going to tell me about women's rights? The only Muslims that behave in that manner are Muslims that have been affected by the unbelievers. Those are the Muslims that behave like that towards their mothers and towards their wives and towards their daughters. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave women nobility. That's why Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala said, he said that I looked at the hadith of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the narrations regarding women. He said that, and I found that every single narration that belittles and demeans women is either weak, or it is munkar, or it is fabricated. Because the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam never demeaned women. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowing a man to have 4 wives is not demeaning. It's honor for her. Because there are always going to be more women than men. And women need looking after. They need help. They need support. They need a man who's going to stand next to them and protect their honor and protect their lives against predators. That's what a man does for his wife. Whether it's the first wife, second wife, third wife, fourth wife. And the majority of men anyway, Muslim men, only have 1 wife. That's the majority. But those that do have 2 wives and 3 wives and 4 wives, then some of them are good to them and some of them are not so good to them. But that's them. But the righteous ones who follow the Kitab and the Sunnah, they are good to their wives, just like they are good to their daughters, just like they are good to their parents. So don't preach to us about nobility and honor and piety and rights. The core message of Islam, of the worship of Allah, is enough to instill fear into a person that he does not want to wrong anyone. But since you don't have Tawheed anyway, therefore you don't fear anyone. The Muslim who worships Allah has fear of Allah, khawf of Allah. That if I wrong such and such, Allah will punish me. So even if I get away with it in this world, I'm not going to get away with it in the hereafter. So I'm not going to. But if you don't have that core tawheed, then you don't fear Allah, because you don't know Him, and you don't worship Him, and you don't hope in Him, and you don't have terror of Him, and you're not dutiful to Him, and you don't make ibadah to Him, you don't worship Him, you don't bow your head to Him, your heart is not filled with love of Him and hope for Him and fear of Him. And of course you're going to wrong the people. That's your deficiency in tawheed. Put Tawheed into the hearts of the people, and all of these wrongs will go, inshaAllah. They won't disappear from the earth, but the more that the people worship Allah and take the message in your da'wah, always back to Tawheed. There's no harm in answering these peripheral questions, but bring it back to Tawheed. Bring it back to Tawheed. And don't let them preach to us about our women, about how Islam treats women. They are good Muslims and they are bad Muslims. But there are a lot more bad unbelievers to their wives. As soon as the World Cup begins, wherever it is, every 4 years, domestic violence goes through the roof. In Europe, goes through the roof. Women get beat up and battered in their homes. Why? Because the men are there watching the telly getting drunk. She does one wrong move in his eyes and she gets a black eye. She gets a broken rib. She gets thrown down the stairs. One, he's drunk. So you have no civil society when alcohol is drunk to that level. Well, how can you live in a civil society when you don't even know what you're doing? That's civil society? How is that civilization? You wake up in the morning, you don't know that you beat up your wife the night before. What happened to your face? You beat me up. That's what happened to my... Why? I don't remember. Why? Because you were so drunk. That's civil society? That's civilized human beings? Don't tell me it's a glass of wine. No one drinks a glass of wine. Right? Maybe you might go to someone that gives you a glass of wine and that's all you drink. When they get drunk, they get drunk. World Cup is a time to get drunk. Christmas is a time to get drunk. Birthdays is a time to get drunk. Every Friday and Saturday is a time to get drunk. Because you want to drown your sorrows and forget all of the problems that you're facing in life. So you want to forget it for those few hours. Then you have the audacity to look at Muslims and say that you come from an uncivilized society. Because you don't have the freedom to walk around intoxicated and drunk and smashed out your heads. I don't take criticism from them. I will not be dishonored by them. Come and stand in my shoes and look at the world with the eyes that I look at, and then you will see where the real problem is. And it is not with Islam. Yes, there are bad Muslims like ISIS and other nutcases that are out there. Yes, they are. But as a religion, as a way of life, there is nothing like it. Fill your heart with the worship of Allah, and all of these wrongs that you do, they will stop. You will feel guilty about putting your mum into a care home and not visiting her for months on end. You will feel that guilt in your heart, and you will say, no, my mother's going to stay with me. And then when your wife says, I can't have your mother in my house, no, you will have my mother in my house, because it is my house. I have no one else to look after her. I don't even want you to look after. I will look after my mother. Where is that amongst the kuffar? They don't have that in there. They used to. Maybe 7, 8 before the Second World War. Post Second World War, all of that went out the window. That's why you see women, elderly women in their 80s and 90s in care homes during the lockdown of COVID, just dying of depression and sadness. Heartbreak is killing them. They haven't seen their children or their grandchildren for 9, 10 months, isolated. That one time a month they used to visit, they can't even visit them now. So obviously they're going to die. You die of heartbreak. Even when I see them and I think to myself, how can anyone? Wallahi, I would treat her better than her own son. And she's not even related to me. And she's a kafir. As a kafira, as a non-Muslim woman, elderly woman, I would treat her better than her own children would. Because I can't see a human being suffer like that. And they allow their parents to suffer like that. I'm not saying every single last one of them, but majority of them. That's how they treat them. Wallahi, I would treat them, their own parents, better than they treat their parents. Even as non-Muslims. As a Muslim, I can't handle that. Because it pains us to see another human being suffering like that, even if they are non-Muslim. This is the justice of Islam, and this is what Tawheed does to our hearts. This is what Tawheed does. This is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one Lord and Creator of the heavens and the earth. And this is how we give da'wah to them. And we do not allow them to criticize our religion. Barakallahu feekum. Upon that note, we'll finish for today. Hayyakumullah. Wa subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.